The Uncontrollable Levitations of Françoise Fontaine. About Albert de Rochas d'Aiglun. Eugène Auguste Albert de Rochas d'Aiglun, 20th of May 1837 to the 2nd of September 1914, was a leading French historian, translator, writer, military engineer, and administrator. He wrote about ancient technology, exploring subjects as diverse as hydraulic organs, water clocks, ancient surveying instruments, temple machinery, Greek artillery, and ancient railways, and was well respected as a researcher, winning a medal from the Société des Études Grecques for his translations of Greek texts. Rochas was made a Chevalier, a knight, in the Légion d'Honneur in 1875 and an officer in 1889. But Rochas is now best known for his extensive parapsychological research and writing. His first book on the subject, Les Forces Non Définies, Undefined Forces, 1887, was followed by numerous books and articles over the course of nearly 30 years, including this one, in French, on levitation. And in this video, we provide the case history of Françoise Fontaine, a poor servant girl. Afflicted by such extraordinary demonstrations that she had asked for all help, including religious help, to be delivered from them. So uncontrollable were her demonstrations she had ended up being kept in Louvier prison to avoid accidents. Background to the case. Rochas found this case history in the French National Library under the snappy title Report Made to Deliver a Girl Possessed by the Evil Spirit to Louvier in 1591 by Louis-Morel, Squire Sieur de la Tour, advisor to the King, Provost General in the Maréchaussée de France and in the province of Normandy, assisted by Monseigneur Robert Behot, law graduate, lawyer, and Lieutenant General, Monsieur le Vicomte de Rouen, at the residence of Louvier. It would seem that although Francoise could levitate, her main powers, those that required an exorcism, were primarily those of involuntary psychokinesis, the ability to move objects, including humans. She had been accused of flinging people and objects so violently against the wall that she and her attendants were often seriously injured. The case history in Albert de Rochas's book is an account of her exorcism recorded by the Provost of Normandy. In his notes on the case, Rochas states that it often happens that the force that lifts the human being also applies to the objects around him. And he continues, we have seen examples of this with Saint Teresa and in the experiments of the Agnelas, where the chair of Eusapia was raised with her. And he also mentions Jerez Entleitung zu Suzo's Leben, writing about Henry Suzo, who once rose into the air, in the open, during a snowstorm, when the snow gathered and remained suspended above his head, forming a kind of roof. The exorcism of Françoise Fontaine. We stopped yesterday with the said priest Pelé, with whom we were transported to the prisons of the said city of Louvier, having brought with him a cleric who carried holy water, and with Vimont, Dupuis, Hello, Dubusque, Le Provost, and others who went into this prison and found this Françoise, who was in a small upper room, lying all dressed on a bunk, with 5 or 6 prisoners guarding her. Her face was all bloody, with scratches, and we asked who had made these scratches. Françoise replied that it was the spirit that tormented her. It had made the scratches on her, and that it was because of what she had confessed the previous Saturday evening, when, in our presence as we questioned her, said spirit had thrown her to the ground, as we had seen. We then admonished Françoise to reconcile her with the fear and love of God, showing her that by recognizing God, crying out to him, confessing her faults, asking for forgiveness, and renouncing the devil, she could come out of the torments where the evil spirit had led her, and that by means of a general confession of her sins that she must make to the priest Pelé, by readying herself to hear the Mass and receive the holy body of our Lord Jesus Christ, she might be helped. And this she promised to do. As a consequence, the aforementioned priest Pelé gave her holy water, and she had a hearing of confession, after which we took Françoise to the Notre Dame church in this city of Louvier, where said priest Pelé, who walked before her wearing his surplice and stole, cast holy water onto her, and we led her to the chapel of the Holy Trinity, where the altar had been set up for Mass, and before which altar we had benches placed, on one of which she knelt down and began to pray to God, being always near Pelé, who was dressed in his vestments with his stole around his neck. We placed ourselves at the corner of the altar and began to utter the Mass, in order to see what effect it would have on Françoise. Monseigneur Jean Buisson, chaplain priest of that church, clothed in his priestly ornaments in order to say Mass, had a great candle lit, which he placed on the edge of the altar, near us. More than 1,000 to 1,200 people, both Catholic and Huguenot, were present, soldiers, and among other quality people, there were Abbot de Mortimer, Rat, Abbot and Councillor at Toulouse Parliament, Rubempre, Baron de Neusberg, Baron de Noyer, Séguier, Grand Maître des Eaux et des Forests de France, Monseigneur Jacques Duval, Doctor in Evreux, Monseigneur Jonas Marie, receiver of the sizes in the election of Montpellier, Monseigneur Nicolas Coquet, priest of the Louvier, Pierre Bihot, Jacques Sugy, Guillaume Jouget the elder, Robert Langlois, bourgeois, and merchants of the Louvier. Françoise had prayed and listened wisely to the Mass, except that when the said priest Buisson began to speak the Gospel, the said Françoise had begun to slumber, her head having fallen on the bench in front of which she was kneeling, as if she had been swooned down and passed out. We warned the said priest Pelé, who then kept his eye on us so that we could warn him if we noticed that the said Françoise was doing something. The said priest Pelé then exorcised her and threw holy water on her. She made the sign of the cross, heard the Gospel, and was then led by Pelé to receive the sacrament. When the body of our Lord Jesus Christ was lifted up, she had looked at it very carefully but had not been tormented in any way, after which elevation the said priest had presented her with the sacrament, and she had kissed it. The priest Buisson wanted to finish saying the Mass, but Pele had ordered Buisson not to finish until he had administered the Blessed Sacrament and the Eucharist to Francoise. So Buisson waited, and Pele, still clothed with his surplice and stole, approached Francoise, having conjured up the evil spirit which Francoise publicly renounced, and took the Holy Eucharist to sign it and make her receive it. But once Francoise said her Misereatur and Confiteor, the demon appeared as a black shadow outside the church, broke a diamond in the windows of the chapel, took the candle that was on the altar, and extinguished it. And here, Francoise, being on 2 knees, had been kidnapped, very horribly, without having been able to receive the Blessed Sacrament. Her mouth was open, her eyes turned up in her head, and she was taken violently up into the air, and it needed the help of 5 to 6 people to grasp her by her clothes as she was taken away. Pele, who had conjured up the said evil spirit, was left astonished and stupefied. Once again he made Francoise recant the evil spirit, and made several admonitions for the salvation of her soul. And once again he presented the Holy Host to the said Francoise, who attempted to receive it on 2 knees. But Francoise was once again lifted up from the ground, higher than the altar, as if taken by her hair, in such a strange way that the terrified attendees, unable to believe they were seeing something so frightening, threw themselves on their knees and began to pray to God and beg for his grace for the deliverance of the said Francoise. Meanwhile, several men had thrown themselves on her to oppose the effect of the enemy who wanted to take her away. Francoise's mouth was open, her eyes were coming out of her head, and she was turned upside down. Again the priest Pele approached her, threw holy water at her, exorcised her, and conjured up the evil spirit. Priest Pele lit another candle, and Francoise returned to herself and regained her senses. But after Francoise had once again shouted, "Thank you to God," and renounced the evil spirit, being on 2 knees, as Pele approached her to present the Holy Eucharist for the 3rd time, she was catapulted over the bench that was in front of the altar where the Mass was celebrated, and carried up to where the window had been broken, head down, feet up, leaving behind her a trail of stinking smoke and water. She was tormented even more, in such a way and with such fury that it was a horrible thing to see, and incredible to those who witnessed it. Francoise was, for a time, so transported in the air that she could not be retaken. But finally, 7 to 8 men had thrown themselves at her and taken her back and put her against the ground, still being tormented in such a way that it was a horrible and pitiful thing to see. Those who were there in great numbers, both Catholics and others, had pity, knelt down and started to pray to God for the salvation of the soul of Francoise. During these prayers for Francoise, Pele again approached her, again exorcised her, and conjured up the said evil spirit, and having thrown holy water at her, declared that Francoise had again renounced the devil, shouted thank you to God, and asked forgiveness for her sins. Francoise said that the first time Pele had introduced her to the Holy Eucharist, she saw the evil spirit, who had entered through a hole he had made in a window of the chapel, and had extinguished the candle that was lit on the altar, and it had taken her by the hair to remove her and carry her away through the hole in the window, lest she receive the holy body of our Lord Jesus Christ. The report ends by saying that because the priest Pelé remembered that whenever Francoise had been kidnapped, she had been taken by the hair, he shaved it off. As a result of this operation and the exorcism we just read, the poor girl was completely cured. An addendum. We may think that even if this story is true, it would never happen these days. But in 1980, an account of two Catholic priests' struggle with a woman named Julia, who they believed was possessed, was recounted on Ashley Flower's True Crime podcast. Father Jacques tried to expel the supposed demon inside Julia by reading out prayers in Latin. Why Latin? Because Julia started speaking in Latin and Spanish, two languages she didn't know. She started thrashing in her seat, fighting with almost superhuman strength, whilst nuns attempted to hold her down and were constantly being knocked to the ground. The struggle continued for almost 2 hours. Just when they thought they were getting somewhere, Julia lifted from out of the chair and started levitating. Apparently, she rose with enough force that they thought she might break through the ceiling of the chapel. Source: The Daily Record, an article by Graham Murray and Chloe Burrell, 1st of July 2021.